Hi, I'm Holly Andrews, Integrative Nutrition Health Coach and Executive Wellness Coach. Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the kitchen. Today I have a special treat for you in this recipe that we are going to make together. I love all things winter squash. I love a butternut squash. I love a spaghetti squash. One squash that I really haven't eaten a lot of though is acorn squash. I remember eating it some as a kid, but just not something we ate a ton of growing up, but that is what we have today. And oh my goodness, they are turning out beautifully. So what we have today is a roasted acorn squash stuffed with quinoa, cranberries, ground turkey, and a whole host of wonderful spices and aromatics. And they look so pretty. They're finishing up in the oven right now, and I'm so excited to share this with you. So let's talk about all the goodness, as always, that is in this recipe. So of course we have the acorn squash, the winter squash, giving us a lovely base for this meal. You can almost think of this meal as almost a nourish bowl, with the bowl being the squash itself. So the squash obviously provides us a ton of fiber to support a healthy gut. It's gonna give us beta carotene, which our body turns into vitamin A. It's full of vitamin C. So all goodness for the things that we need this time of year to support our immune system and a healthy gut. Now, added to that, the stuffing mix is full of all kinds of goodness too. So we've got the quinoa, which is a protein-heavy grain that's also going to be loaded with fiber. As I said, the protein got a lot of magnesium, which is really important for maintaining energy levels, especially this time of year when kind of energy levels tend to drop, and supports muscle function as well. That's in our stuffing. We've got some ground turkey breast, which is straight up protein, which we always need. You should be aiming for 100 grams of protein a day, if not more, depending on your activity level. So that ground turkey breast, straight up protein, all goodness there. We've obviously got some cranberries. So the recipe itself calls for dried, unsweetened cranberries. I didn't have any of that, so I had frozen cranberries. And I have given you instructions in the written recipe, which you can find at the link below, on how to adjust for using frozen cranberries in this recipe instead of dried cranberries, if that's what you happen to have on hand. And I would say the same would go for fresh cranberries as well. So if you've got fresh or frozen cranberries, use that alternate amount and check the notes for how to go about doing that. But obviously, super antioxidant rich. They provide a nice tartness and counterbalance to some of the sweetness in the squash. So the vitamin C as well coming in through those cranberries. We've got pecans, which are heart healthy, good omega-3 fats. And of course, all of those warming, wonderful warming spices that are anti-inflammatory, blood sugar balancing, like cinnamon, nutmeg. I've got some sage in there, which helps with liver detox. And we've all got thyme as well. So all that goodness packed into one meal. And let's talk about how we make it. All right, so the first thing I did was prepare my squash. So I cut my 2 acorn squashes in half, scooped out the seeds and the guts, and then I drizzled the edges of the acorn squash with some olive oil just so it didn't burn. Placed those face down on a baking sheet that I had prepared with some parchment paper. Popped those into a 400-degree oven for about 40 minutes. While the acorn squash was cooking, I was getting things ready for the stuffing. First thing I did was chop my pecans up. I chopped my onion, and then I got to making things like the quinoa. So follow the instructions for whatever quinoa that you have, but generally speaking, it's a cup of quinoa to 2 cups of water. Bring that to a boil, pop a lid on it, turn it down, let it simmer for about 15 minutes, and then your quinoa is done. So I got my quinoa going, and then I got the rest of it going by heating up some olive oil in a pan, adding my onions to that pan once it was hot, then adding some garlic, and then to that, once the garlic became fragrant, adding my ground turkey in, and really trying to get that ground turkey as fine as possible, just so that it would do well in the stuffing. So I let that ground turkey, onion, garlic mix cook up. And then once that was cooked, I added my spices to the ground turkey. So at that point, once the ground turkey was done, I turned the eye off. I wasn't worried about it because, you know, spoiling or whatever, because it was sitting on a hot stove and the oven was keeping things warm. So I just didn't want the turkey to dry out. Since it was ground turkey breast, it's very, very lean. I didn't want to lose any of that moisture out of the turkey. So once the quinoa was done, I started to prepare the whole stuffing mix. Now, the directions say put everything into a separate mixing bowl. I just didn't want to fuss with that. So I put everything into the pan with my turkey breast. So I added the quinoa once it was done. I added my pecans. I added my cranberries. And because I was using the frozen cranberries, I drizzled just a little bit, probably a tablespoon of maple syrup onto that, because the frozen cranberries are much tartar than the dried cranberries, which tend to be sweeter, even if you're using unsweetened cranberries. So I didn't want to like get a bite and be like, sour, gross, yuck. So just a tiny bit of maple syrup to counteract the super tart frozen cranberries. Mixed that all up. Gave it for taste to make sure the spices were balanced. I wound up adding a little bit more salt, and at that point I called it good. Once the acorn squash was done, I pulled it out of the oven, very carefully turned the acorn squashes over, and oh my goodness, the edges of the acorn squash perfectly caramelized, just gorgeous. And then I proceeded to stuff the squash cavities with my stuffing. Now I did pack it down in there, pack the stuffing down in to make sure that like I got enough of it in each of the squash halves. I did wind up with a little bit of stuffing left over. No big deal. I just put that in another container. I'm gonna put it in the fridge and keep it around for a snack or breakfast or lunch or whatever I need some protein for, because it's pretty much pure protein. I'm actually happy that I had some leftover stuffing. And right now, once I got all of the squash halves stuffed, I put them back into the oven for about 10 to 15 minutes just to make sure that everything's heated through, the squash is fully cooked, and that's where it is right now. So once that is done, I will come back and show you what it looks like. All right, friends, here is the finished product with the acorn squash, the stuffed acorn squash. Doesn't that just look so pretty? Like, I love, it looks like Christmas because you've got the green from the squash and the red from the cranberries. I just think it looks beautiful, and I know it's gonna taste beautiful as well. So that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this recipe. Probably might not do this on a busy weeknight, but it would be perfect for a weekend meal when you're not maybe so rushed, maybe a Sunday afternoon. But it is absolutely a gorgeous meal. It tastes so good, and I know that you are gonna love it as much as I do. So enjoy, and until next time, I'm Holly Andrews, and I believe that you can heal your stress from the inside out.